Welcome to the channel. Share where you're watching from. We'd love to find out, so drop a comment below, and let's jump into the story. Last night shattered my world in a way I never thought possible. My name is Michael Turner, and I'm a commercial airline pilot based in Chicago. We were grounded due to a mechanical issue with one of the engines during a pre-flight check, delaying the usual midnight flight to Seattle. After 2 hours of maintenance, the crew declared the aircraft unfit for flying, rebooking all passengers on later flights. This meant I was heading home at 2 a.m. instead of starting my typical red-eye. The first odd sign appeared as soon as I pulled into our quiet suburban neighborhood. A white Mercedes, parked 2 houses down, stood out like a sore thumb in our well-worn neighborhood where every car was as familiar as the faces that owned them. Its headlights were off, but I could see someone sitting inside, silhouetted in the streetlight glow. For a moment, I considered asking who they were, but exhaustion got the best of me. Walking up to our front door, I noticed soft music playing inside, not too unusual, as my wife, Jessica, often stayed up late editing photos for her magazine assignments. But as I inserted my key into the lock, the music stopped abruptly, and the house fell into an unusual stillness. Inside, the house was dark except for a faint glow coming from the home office upstairs. In the kitchen, I noticed 2 wine glasses in the sink. One had a lipstick stain in the new shade Jessica recently started wearing, a shade I'd once complimented her on, not knowing it would someday signal betrayal. The other glass had smudges, as though someone else had been sipping from it too. Draped over the arm of the couch was an unfamiliar leather jacket, a men's jacket, clearly not mine. Each step I took up the stairs felt like thunder on the hardwood, the sound amplifying the tension gnawing at my stomach. My heart raced as I reached the closed office door, where I could hear faint, hurried whispers and the sound of drawers being closed. When I opened the door, Jessica was seated at her computer, fully dressed but noticeably disheveled. Her lipstick was slightly smeared. "You're home early," she said, forcing a casual tone while her fingers fumbled nervously across the keyboard, clicking away from whatever was on her screen. "Flight got cancelled," I replied, my eyes narrowing as I took in the faint signs of someone else's recent presence. The bathroom window, just across from her office, was open, and the cold February breeze drifted into the house. I walked over and looked outside, just in time to see the white Mercedes pull away. Even in the dim light, I recognized the driver, Evan Matthews, the new senior editor at Vista magazine, where Jessica freelanced as a photographer. I'd met him a couple of times at our house for work reviews, and each time something about his charming yet smug demeanor unsettled me. The following hour was a haze of denial, excuses, and, finally, a confession that hit me like a punch to the gut. Jessica had been seeing Evan for months, exploring polyamory with him. She had joined online forums about open relationships, dipping her toe into a world of ethical non-monogamy without so much as mentioning it to me. She said they'd been planning to approach me about opening our marriage once the timing was right, a timing that apparently came only after she'd already slept with him. In her panic, Jessica had left her iPad unlocked. Months of messages with Evan were open on her screen, revealing details of their meetings, explicit photos, and conversations about how they'd pitch the idea of an open marriage to me. Some messages went back almost 7 months. After 7 years together and 5 years of marriage, everything we had was shattered, and for what? A conversation she never had the courage to start before leaping into bed with someone else. I grabbed my flight bag, which still had 3 days' worth of clothes from my planned trip to Seattle. The last thing I heard as I walked out was Jessica saying, "This wasn't how I wanted you to find out," as if there was ever a good way to discover your spouse is cheating. Now, I'm sitting in a hotel room at the Lakeside Inn, near the Chicago airport, watching the early morning planes take off, wondering how 7 years of trust could dissolve in a matter of minutes. Her messages keep lighting up my phone, each one filled with excuses, then justifications, and finally pleas about how polyamory is natural and how marriage shouldn't mean ownership. Tomorrow, I'm calling a lawyer. Tonight, I'm left questioning every moment of our life together. Since people ask about our history, here it is, and maybe this is why the whole thing seems surreal. Jessica and I met at a charity event for Angel Wings, a foundation where pilots volunteer to transport patients to medical facilities. I was a newly licensed commercial pilot, volunteering on my days off. Jessica was covering the event as a freelance photographer for a local paper, still building her portfolio back then. We connected over a mutual love for aviation, not just flying, but the culture and sense of purpose it brought. She'd grown up around airports since her father was a flight instructor, and her way of capturing the spirit of aviation in her photography drew me in immediately. Within 6 months, Jessica landed her first major project with a travel magazine. I remember the night she got the call. She was thrilled, and I was genuinely proud of her, even as our schedules became more hectic. Her career took off: magazine covers, exhibitions, international assignments. When her projects took her to places like Tokyo, Paris, or Singapore, I could often coordinate my routes to match her schedule, turning our layovers into mini vacations. We even got married in Sedona, Arizona, during a combined trip, a location as beautiful and isolated as our shared dreams felt back then. Last year, everything seemed to be falling into place. I was promoted to captain on the Boeing 737, giving me more control over my schedule. Jessica signed on as a lead photographer for Wanderlust Adventures, a prominent adventure travel magazine, and we bought our first home in a quiet suburb just outside of Chicago. We'd even started talking about having kids. But now, looking back, I realize that was the beginning of the change. It started subtly. Jessica began focusing more on local assignments instead of international ones, saying she wanted to build a stronger network in Chicago. She started attending more industry events and photography workshops, which is where she met Evan, the magazine's senior editor who had recently moved from New York. I remember the first time Evan came over for one of those portfolio review sessions. He brought over an expensive bottle of wine, raved about his gallery shows in LA, and went on about artistic freedom and the need to push boundaries. I found him pretentious, but I kept my mouth shut, not wanting to interfere with her career. After all, he was essentially Jessica's boss. The first real red flag came a month later when Jessica suddenly became interested in redefining relationship paradigms. She started following polyamory accounts on social media, reading books about open relationships and ethical non-monogamy. When I asked her about it, she said it was research for a documentary she planned to pitch. I brushed it off, trusting her, but now I see all the warning signs I missed. Late-night, emergency editing sessions became frequent, and her wardrobe shifted from her usual casual attire to designer clothes that seemed out of place for someone crawling around to get the perfect shot. She joined a luxury fitness studio downtown, Pulse and Flow, with a monthly fee higher than most gym memberships. When I commented on the cost, she called it an investment in her brand, since she occasionally photographed fitness personalities. The studio offered late-night wellness workshops that supposedly kept her out until 11 p.m. twice a week, then 3 times, then 4. One night, I decided to surprise her by bringing dinner after my flight, only to find Pulse and Flow completely closed and locked. Her location sharing showed her there, but when I called, she answered saying she was networking with other studio members at a nearby coffee shop, Roast and Brew. The next day, she turned off her location sharing, citing privacy issues and claiming her phone was glitchy. In January, things took another turn. Jessica revamped her wardrobe completely, replacing her practical gear with designer outfits and spending over $2,000 on a shopping spree. When I saw the statement, she said the magazine wanted their photographers to embody a more upscale image. Our joint credit card got declined at Costco because she'd maxed it out on clothes and spa sessions. Curious, I checked our account, finding dozens of charges at high-end restaurants and bars around Chicago, always for 2 people, and always on nights when I was in the air. I also noticed a pattern: she was making regular payments on a new credit card in her name, one I hadn't known about before. Her phone became a fortress, the passcode changed, and she started using her fingerprint for access. She kept it face down all the time, even carrying it with her to the shower. I guess it's waterproof. But the final straw came one night when I caught her deleting messages at 3 a.m. She claimed she was just clearing up storage, but her uneasy expression told a different story. Our intimacy had all but disappeared. Every time I tried to be close, there was an excuse, a headache, a deadline, an early shoot. Yet, she was buying expensive lingerie. I found the receipts in her car. When I questioned it, she said it was for an upcoming boudoir photography project. She'd never shown any interest in boudoir work before. And while she used to share the images she'd taken, this time there was nothing. Social media added another layer of suspicion. Jessica untagged herself from our photos, started posting cryptic captions about personal growth and embracing change, and her stories showed her out at art galleries, wine bars, and rooftop lounges on nights she'd claimed she was editing at home. She'd even missed my niece's birthday party, claiming a last-minute shoot. Later, I stumbled across a post from another photographer's page showing her at Skyline Lounge, a rooftop bar in the city. When I confronted her, she gaslit me, saying it was an old photo and that I was being paranoid. Then, 2 weeks before that fateful night, I overheard her in the garage, laughing in a way I hadn't heard in years. It was the laugh she used to share with me. When she saw me, she ended the call abruptly, claiming it was a client discussing a pregnancy photo shoot. We both knew she didn't do maternity photography. But the worst sign of all. She'd started leaving her wedding ring at home during her shoots, saying she didn't want to risk scratching the lens filters. This was the same ring she had once insisted on wearing even when we went swimming. It all felt wrong. And yet, every incident had a convenient explanation, each excuse layered with professional justifications that made it difficult to call her out directly. It was like watching a photo slowly develop, but each detail only sharpened a truth I didn't want to acknowledge. Then came that cancelled flight, and my unexpected early return home. Suddenly, every suspicion, every red flag, clicked into place, revealing a picture I'd never imagined. The hours that followed my walkout felt like a crash course in betrayal. From my room at the Lakeside Inn, I started digging. Jessica's iPad was still synced to her iCloud, something she'd forgotten in her rush. What I found was devastating: hundreds of messages with Evan, photos I could never unsee, and detailed plans about their meetings, timed perfectly with my flight schedule. Their shared Instagram account, Boundless Love, documented their escapades in artsy photos and poetic quotes about breaking societal constraints. Some of these photos were taken in our home, in our bed, while I was flying across the country. As dawn approached, I found more on our bank statements: charges for upscale restaurants, weekend retreats billed as photography workshops, and hotel stays in cities where I often had layovers. They were meeting up in the same cities I was flying to, likely laughing at the absurdity of it all. The real blow was a draft email, intended for me but never sent, where they outlined a pitch to open our marriage. They had scripted how to frame it as Jessica's journey of self-discovery, and even how Evan would just happen to express interest. They had planned to manipulate me into accepting their relationship after the fact. Around 6 a.m., my phone lit up with a message from an unknown number. It was from Evan's wife, Lydia, a forensic accountant. She had suspected him for weeks and had quietly hired a private investigator, gathering enough evidence to file for divorce. Lydia and I spent hours comparing notes, piecing together a timeline that showed just how elaborate Jessica and Evan's affair had been. Lydia shared details I never could have anticipated, like the secret gifts Evan had been charging to his expense account at Vista magazine and how they'd even set up a shared credit card. I blocked Jessica's number as her messages grew increasingly frantic, ranging from angry accusations of invading her privacy to defensive lectures on the validity of polyamory, and finally desperate pleas that she had always meant to tell me. By 9 a.m., I was sitting across from a divorce lawyer, who called it one of the most well-documented cases of infidelity he'd seen. He advised filing for divorce immediately and suggested I document everything, telling me to avoid freezing joint accounts to prevent issues in the settlement. My next stop was the bank, where I separated our accounts, canceled joint credit cards, and redirected my direct deposits. Back at the hotel, I started getting emails from Jessica's family. Her sister, horrified, admitted she had her suspicions but kept quiet to avoid causing drama. Jessica's father, the one who'd first inspired her love for aviation, wrote a heartfelt apology, feeling ashamed of what she'd become. Meanwhile, Vista magazine's HR department received an anonymous email with evidence of Jessica and Evan's affair. It likely came from Lydia, and both Jessica and Evan were quickly suspended pending further investigation. By nightfall, I had retained my lawyer, filed the divorce papers, and booked a corporate apartment in the city. The next morning, I had to put on my uniform, face my crew, and fly a full schedule as if my entire life hadn't just crumbled. But for that night, I sat in my hotel room, staring out at the darkened runway, realizing that some of us weren't the only ones leading double lives. First update, 3 weeks after discovery. These past 3 weeks have been a whirlwind of legal meetings, evidence gathering, and revelations that make me question every moment with Jessica. The divorce papers landed on her desk at Vista magazine, though it was barely her desk anymore. Their suspension turned into a formal termination after several staff members came forward, sharing stories of Jessica and Evan's inappropriate behavior on the job. They'd been using work assignments as a cover for their rendezvous, billing hotel stays and equipment rentals to the magazine for work that was never completed. My lawyer was stunned at the trail of evidence. From their shared Instagram account to credit card statements and hotel receipts, we had what he called an airtight case. And the irony? They had documented the affair themselves through artistic photographs, with timestamps and geotags that practically painted a timeline of deception. Jessica didn't take the divorce filing well. She showed up at my corporate apartment unannounced, sweet-talking her way past security. To this day, I don't know how she found my address. When I opened the door, she immediately launched into a speech about soulmates and artistic connection, blaming me for punishing her honesty. She conveniently ignored the fact that her honesty came only after being caught. Security escorted her out, and I realized I'd have to increase security measures. Lydia, Evan's wife, has been an unexpected ally. A forensic accountant by trade, she uncovered a pattern of lavish gifts and professional expenses charged to the magazine, camera gear that was really jewelry, reference books that turned out to be weekends at upscale resorts. Meanwhile, the photography community's rumor mill was on overdrive. Their so-called creative collaboration had become industry gossip after someone leaked their Instagram to major photography groups. Contracts were being cancelled, and their partnership quickly turned toxic. Jessica's next move was predictable. She played the victim on social media, posting vague messages about persecution for following her heart and the outdated restraints of traditional marriage. Her comments section was anything but supportive. Several colleagues called her out, citing unprofessional behavior and ethics violations. Evan's response: total radio silence. He deleted his social media, changed his phone number, and, according to Lydia, is suddenly working on his marriage now that his career is imploding. Jessica learned about this through industry gossip, and her messages to me shifted from eternal love declarations to bitter accusations of abandonment. I've moved most of my belongings into the corporate apartment, and for the first time in months, I feel a sense of peace. No more checking receipts, no more strange cars parked in the neighborhood, no more gnawing gut feelings that something was wrong. The divorce is proceeding, and each discovery only strengthens my case. My lawyer says Jessica's repeated attempts to contact me could be documented as harassment. Every message she sends about understanding her journey or accepting love's many forms goes straight into our evidence file. My crew has been a solid support system. They adjusted my flight schedule to avoid layovers in cities where Jessica and Evan might be, and other pilots have covered for me when I needed time for legal meetings. The aviation community takes care of its own, and I'm grateful for that. Next week, we start dividing assets. Jessica's already arguing that she needs the house for her home studio. Funny, since she never mentioned this studio during her hotel getaways with Evan. The judge will love that argument. Second update, 6 weeks post-discovery. 6 weeks have felt like a lifetime, yet each new discovery validates my decision to leave. Remember Jessica's insistence that polyamory is natural and her claims about ethical non-monogamy? Turns out that neither Jessica nor Evan were exactly following the ethical part of it. Lydia found a secret chat group, not just messages between Jessica and Evan but a full community of industry photographers sharing tips on hiding affairs, hotel recommendations, fake work events, even tricks for editing metadata on photos to change locations. They had a system for everything, with some openly bragging about using company resources to fund their double lives. Several executives at Vista magazine were involved, which explained how they'd gotten away with it for so long. The magazine's parent company launched a major investigation, and 5 senior staff members were suspended. 3 top advertisers pulled out, and the legal team is now combing through years of expense reports with a fine-tooth comb. Speaking of finances, our divorce proceedings uncovered some shocking details. Remember those late-night, emergency editing sessions? Jessica had charged over $15,000 in professional development expenses to our joint account. Spa weekends, luxury hotels, designer clothes, all classified as business expenses for her career development. Jessica's family has completely distanced themselves from her. Her father, who built his reputation on trust and integrity in aviation, can't even look her in the eye. Her sister sent me screenshots of messages where Jessica bragged about her liberated lifestyle while I was away flying across the country. Even her mother, who initially tried to play peacemaker, has since stopped defending her after learning the extent of her deception. The photography community has all but imploded around them. Evan threw Jessica under the bus without hesitation, claiming she initiated everything and pressured him into fraudulent expenses. He even wrote a long apology email to Lydia, CCing HR and blaming Jessica for manipulating him. Jessica's response was another drunken appearance, this time at Evan's new apartment. She caused such a scene that the neighbors called the police. Meanwhile, Lydia and I have remained in touch, and she's uncovered even more of their deception. Her forensic accounting skills uncovered hidden credit cards, joint accounts we never knew about, and even a rented storage unit packed with expensive camera gear, items bought on the company's dime. The house sale is going smoothly, and with the market being strong, we're set to close next month. Jessica argued in court that she needed the house for her home studio, but the judge was unmoved, especially after seeing the social media evidence of how our home was used for non-professional activities. My crew has been a source of humor through all of this. They even made a mock safety checklist: engines, check. Navigation, check. Toxic exes, negative. The aviation community truly sticks together, and their support has made a difference. Third update, 9 weeks post-discovery. 9 weeks in, and it feels like I've lived through years. Each day brings a new revelation, each one reminding me that leaving was the right decision. Jessica's career in professional photography. It's over, not just in Chicago, but nationally. 3 major photography associations have revoked her memberships. Galleries have removed her work, and her old newspaper clips vanished from online archives. She tried launching a personal photography blog, but the internet has a long memory, and every post gets flooded with comments about her questionable ethics. Evan's world unraveled, too. Turns out he had taken out a lease on a hidden downtown apartment, probably for secret meetings. With every discovery, my case grows stronger, while her attempts to claim alimony look more hopeless. The aviation side of my life has been a sanctuary. These days, I'm training new pilots, teaching them not only about flying but also about integrity, responsibility, and the importance of trust. They're lessons I've had to relearn the hard way. In a surprising turn, Jessica's father reached out to me recently. He's retiring from flight instruction and asked if I'd take on some of his long-term students. He said he'd rather they stay in the aviation family, meaning me, not his daughter. According to her sister, this news hit Jessica hard. With the corporate apartment lease ending, I decided it was time for a fresh start. I bought a modern place near the airport, a quiet space without hidden corners or reminders of betrayal. Lydia's case against Evan is moving quickly, too. She found evidence of similar misconduct in his past, 2 previous marriages, 2 previous affairs with coworkers. The moment this came up in court, Jessica's expression was almost worth the pain I'd been through. In the industry, the fallout continues. More secret chat groups are surfacing. Jessica's latest approach? She's playing the reformed sinner, posting about learning from her mistakes and the price of authenticity. But then, someone leaked screenshots of her new dating profile, created just 2 weeks after our separation. She described herself as ethically non-monogamous. It's clear she hasn't learned a thing. Therapy has been my anchor. My counselor, who happens to be a private pilot, specializes in betrayal trauma and understands the unique pressures of an aviation career. His approach is straightforward, no clichés, just clear advice on healing and moving forward. Each session helps me rebuild, piece by piece. Final update, 9 months post-discovery. 9 months since that cancelled flight changed everything, and now, it's all finally over. The divorce was finalized yesterday, and the magazine industry is still dealing with the shockwaves from their scandal. The house sold without any issues, and the judge denied Jessica's attempt to claim half of my pension, citing documented misuse of marital funds. Her lawyer even quit after she tried submitting doctored expense reports as evidence. Jessica and Evan's attempt at dating openly lasted just 17 days. He moved in with her as soon as his wife kicked him out, and they began posting about their brave new chapter on social media. It wasn't long before Jessica caught him using their joint account to arrange meetups with other photographers. Her efforts to reinvent herself professionally have backfired, too. She tried freelancing under her maiden name, but Google never forgets. She even attempted to become an authenticity coach on Instagram, only to be met with brutal comments exposing her past. The aviation community, on the other hand, proved itself as my rock. Lydia's doing incredibly well. She used her forensic accounting skills to start a consulting business, helping companies prevent expense fraud. She's landed contracts with 3 major publishing houses, finding purpose by turning their deceit into case studies. My new place feels like home. The walls are filled with photos from my travels, real ones I took myself, not staged, deceptive shots. I even started a photography club for pilots, where we share moments captured during layovers. Last week, Jessica sent one final attempt at manipulation, a 12-page letter about growth through adversity and finding authentic love. She included edited photographs from our marriage and quoted philosophers on forgiveness. I took them to my backyard and burned them. In the end, that cancelled flight was the best mechanical failure of my career. I could have spent years at cruising altitude while Jessica lived a double life on the ground. Instead, that unscheduled landing led me to the truth.